It's going to go online.
Hello. Olson. Yes, another beautiful art chatter, this time coming from Austin, Texas. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. We've had a lot of fun doing your drawing. Well, fun and frustrations. But I've been like majorly pleased with seeing the new direction that you've done the past day, like well, when I commented on, but what you posted on your story the other day. Yeah. So we spent a lot more time yesterday doing that method than I had anticipated, and it was so meditative, and just we had music going, and we'll let you tell the rest. But thank you for joining us, and this is the class.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't know where to start. So I guess I'm going to start with my original art journey, which started well, let me get to that. So I became an artist by accident. I took art as an elective in junior high, and that's the extent of my formal training. So I come from a long line of very creative Scandinavian farmers, but pursuing a creative career was not exactly encouraged. You were expected to work hard and work at something real. So I went to college and studied psychology, which, nobody was really pleased with either. But I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Texas at Austin. And then I went on to their PhD program in the social personality department, where I was miserable for a myriad of reasons. But one of the biggest problems you'll face as...
I just fell.
Oh, did you? Well, thanks. I guess.
I was bored by the Scandinavian farmers.
Yeah, so I'm actually the first generation of my family that didn't grow up on a farm. So it's kind of weird. My upbringing was very different than any of the generations previous to me. But anyway, so I went into academia. I was a PhD student, and I was miserable, largely because being an academic was somebody else's dream for me. But also, when you are kind of a closeted artist in academia, creative people are energized by making things. And the job of an academic is to pick things apart. It's a reductive process. And I found that incredibly stifling. So I dropped out and felt like a failure for a very long time, like so long I don't even want to tell you, and entered the tech industry, where I specialized in talking to engineers and customers and figuring out the disconnects between those two things. So I was in operations roles at companies like Retail Me Not, Facebook, and then at this random aircraft company. And at that last random aircraft company, I mouthed off to an executive in the break room, and somehow that got me promoted. So I became an executive assistant. I know you think like doing a good job and being diligent and polite is what gets you promoted, and sometimes it's quite the opposite. And that was just as much a shock to me as it was anyone else. So at this point, when I became an executive assistant, I hadn't made art regularly for my entire adult life. I'd always written. I've kept a journal since I was, I guess, 7 years old. And I worked writing a memoir with a woman here in town, Donna Johnson, who wrote a book called The Holy Ghost Girl, that did really well. And she still lectures on it to this day. And so that my identity was more towards writer and not visual artist. So this whole visual arts thing came as a surprise. So how and why did I start making art? So COVID. So in probably, I think it was mid-March 2020, our offices shut down in Austin, and I worked from home for about a year, and then I was laid off and unemployed for 11 months. And everybody around me was in crisis while I absolutely flourished. I always knew I was introverted, but I didn't know the depth and magnitude of my introversion until absolutely all of my social engagements were stripped away. And I had all of like this windfall of time because, you know, you're not hanging out with anyone anymore. You're not going to bars and drinking, which is the biggest waste of time. Like we can talk about that later if you want. And then I didn't have a job, and we were given really good unemployment. So I didn't have to worry about money, and I could just do things for the fun of it. So I did. I really took advantage of this time and did something with it. So I picked up a copy of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. We can talk about that some if you have questions. And I was walking around in the greenbelt behind my house, which is like this stretch of 20 miles of wooded protected land. And I came across this painted rock that said, "Have a nice day," with little cheesy like flowers painted on it. I mean, it looked like it was painted by a grade school kid, but it actually absolutely delighted me. And I thought, well, I can do that. You know, I can start sharing my, like, doing creative work, you know, painting rocks, and share my work that way and get started with something. And I could just, you know, put it out there into the world and leave it in the park for someone to find. So before I show you this next slide, I want you to know that there is a theme in my presentation, and that is first attempts really suck and practice makes perfect, or at least better. So I started painting rocks. I went to the dollar store and got some paint and some paintbrushes and made some very simple rocks. And on the back of each one, the front always had a little picture. And then on the back, I always painted "hi," period. And I left these out in the park. And I was terrified the first time I put one of these rocks out. I felt really vulnerable. And also I was afraid someone was going to get mad at me. And like, I don't know, like the Karens would be hiding behind trees and coming out and be like, "You can't do that here," which actually did happen later, but not at first. But so I started putting out these rocks, and I made hundreds of them. And as I started making rocks and leaving them in the parks, other people started painting rocks and leaving them in the park. And there was like this very small, like creative event spontaneously taking like happening, and I felt responsible for it, and it really led me up. So here are what my rocks evolved into. And I'm literally made hundreds of them. I can't even tell you how many, but I made a bunch of Where's Waldo. Do you guys know Where's Waldo? Yes, no. Yeah. Okay. So, and I found that idea on Instagram. A lot of the work that I did at first was not original. It was stuff that I copied from illustrators and other people making rocks online. Like somebody else had put out a Where's Waldo online on like a rock Instagram. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. But instead of just doing one, I did like 20 of them. And I made this little creative game out in the park, and people started adding to it. And it's a movement that started to grow. And that really excited me. And then, so I kind of got tired of painting rocks and went back to the dollar store and moved on to tiny canvases that I got at the dollar store. The paints I upgraded. I got those from Walmart, so I had a broader selection of colors. And this first little canvas that I did, The Girl in the Orange Mask, that's actually a copy, or most of a copy, or was heavily inspired by a pencil drawing by another artist on Instagram that I saw somewhere. But I took that concept and made more girls in different animal masks. And the next two, the middle and the one to the far right, are my own original designs, or as original as you can copy. But I wasn't really like I enjoyed painting, but I find picking colors really stressful. And I find that waiting for paint to dry interrupts my creative flow. So I was kind of like, what else can I do? So I did a bunch of stuff. I crocheted. And then I also want to share 2 more projects that I did that were more interactive, because crocheting scarves isn't all that fun to talk about. But another park project I did were these red birdhouses. They were inspired by the cardinals that I saw at the park. And these are the ones that kind of got me in trouble with people, or the Karens, I call them. But so basically, I put these little birdhouses, several of them, in little secret spots that were off the beaten path. And I wrote little notes on scrolls and just, watched what happened. And this is another project that people spontaneously started interacting with. And that was very exciting to me. People left their own notes in my birdhouse. Some people, like somebody left $1 at some point. And then somebody was like, leave no trace, because I was breaking the park rules. You're not supposed to leave anything in the park. And it's, but I was like, it's a pandemic. I think we can, break that rule in the name of connecting to one another in a way that doesn't spread COVID. But people started leaving gifts. Little gnomes, these little guardian people with spears in the trees. And they took rocks and shells from the park and made formations on the ground around it. And this was a way for me to explore my creativity and also share my creativity, and explore some of this vulnerability and shame that I had around it, that I kind of knew about, but wouldn't ever really confront. And this was my way of getting to the point where I wasn't afraid to hide the fact that I had this very artistic side to me, and that I was kind of, insecure about the quality of the work that I was doing. But I had such a positive response from most people that it really fed me. And even when, I quote unquote, the haters came by, like somebody took one of my birdhouses and smashed it. And then somebody put it back together and then propped it up in the tree. And that really warmed my heart that some stranger was invested enough in these little birdhouses that they took the time to fix my birdhouse and prop it up in the tree. So that picture is really kind of important to me. And then, so from there, I also made, so this is probably the coolest story that came out of the pandemic. And I hadn't discovered line drawing yet at this point. Okay, so these 2 pictures are related, I promise. So this first picture is a sticker of this 2020 toilet paper that I made. And I had these made into stickers and passed them out to Amazon delivery drivers. I was mailing them to friends in the mail, and giving them to the Starbucks drive-through lady, just anybody. And people just absolutely loved them and laughed. And a few of them I found on stop signs in different places around town. And that really warmed my heart. But okay, so that's what I was doing with that. And then, so this other picture of this woman with the horse, that's my neighbor, Teresa. And Teresa lives downstairs from me. And she is somebody that I gave one of these stickers to in passing. And during COVID, she had a mental breakdown, and we didn't know each other very, very well. We were kind of hi-bye neighbors, talked about the weather, and we'd been neighbors for, I don't know, 4 years. So I give her one of these stickers, and she had a mental breakdown and ended up having to go to the hospital. But during that breakdown, I kind of took care of her until help was able to come. And she had to go to the hospital for a while. But when she got out of the hospital, okay, and I have to explain. So her breakdown, part of her breakdown was that there were deep military people across. I feel bad sharing this a little bit. but I think she would appreciate the story. But, you know, she was seeing things that weren't there or having paranoias about things that weren't there. So she comes to me when she gets out of the hospital and she's like, hey, I want to talk to you about those toilet paper stickers. I think my fan base would really like those. And I was like, if you want more stickers, you can just have them. And I was like, in my head, I was like, you don't have fans? What are you talking about? And she was like, no, my fan base. Like, I have a large fan base. And I was like, okay. And she was like, yeah, I used to be in this infamous punk rock band called the Butthole Surfers. And all of a sudden, it kind of clicked as to who she was. So my neighbor is Teresa Taylor, aka Teresa Nervosa, and she was a drummer in a very famous and prominent punk rock band that did a lot for independent music back in the 80s and 90s. And she's also in a Richard Linklater film, and there's a mural of her in Austin, like on the side of a building. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So she was like, yeah, we could sell these to my fans and make some money because they really like bathroom humor. So, you know, and I just made these stickers on a whim. Like, this is kind of the magic that starts to happen when you just start doing stuff and sharing it with people with no expectation. And now Teresa and I are really quite close, and she's unfortunately on hospice right now. She has end-stage lung disease, and I'm part of her support network, but it's really become an important relationship for me that I would not have ever discovered had it not been for COVID and making a sticker on a whim. And sharing it. The sharing part's very important. So, and then she's in this picture with the horse because one of the other things that I started doing just for fun during my unemployment and, you know, COVID vacation, as I like to call it, was I started working with horses again. And that isn't something that I had done since, you know, I was a child, essentially. And that has brought such a renewing energy to my life that I can't believe I ever let these things go in order to quote unquote become a real person and have a real career. Because I literally don't know how I was getting through life without art and horses for basically my entire adult life. It's crazy that we do this to ourselves, but we do. And then what is next? Wait. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So then I discovered Dots by Gemma on Instagram. And so this picture on the left-hand side is my very first attempt at one of her tutorials. And I attempted this in July 2020. I remember it because I was like, I am so bad at this. This is not for me, blah. And I set it down and did other things like crocheting scarves and blah, blah, blah. And at some point months later, I came back to it for whatever reason, because I really, really liked their work. And you did do her tutorials online, right?
Yep.
You have seen her Instagram? Okay, great. So I came back to it, and this picture on the right-hand side is the first completed line drawing that I ever finished. And from there, the rest is history. My Instagram, I have posted every drawing that I've made chronologically. So you see my entire evolution from the very first drawing to what I'm creating now. And just to like emphasize that point. So this is, you know, my first attempt to my first drawing to 100 plus drawings later. There you can see, I think you can see a vast improvement. Some of my friends really like my earlier work better because my lines are getting tighter. And I think that in the process of making art, you kind of start out kind of loose with your lines because you don't have control at all. And then you kind of get tight and kind of controlled with it. And I think the next jump is going to be a controlled looseness. at some point, I think that will happen. I don't know. I never know where these lines are taking me ever. But does anyone have any questions at this point?
So,
no.
Yeah.
No?
I do.
Yeah.
Did you run into anyone in the park that, I mean, besides the Karens who are not for it, but did you have interactions with people who were fans?
Yes. Yeah, actually, okay. So I would go and check on. So I did get a rock. I had several places where I regularly placed my rocks. And one day, in place of my rock, there was a rock that was painted, "Thank you for the rocks." So that was one. And then I would go and check on the birdhouses at least once a day. And I was trying really hard not to be caught doing any of these things because I don't know, I was just paranoid and scared and I don't know, insecure. And I was like changing the note out in the birdhouse. And this woman like literally jumped out from behind a bush and said, are you the keeper of the birdhouse? And I was like, oh gosh, I have to admit it now, I'm caught. And I was like, yeah. And I was fully expecting her to reprimand me or something. And she didn't. She thanked me for it and told me how much she appreciated it and that it was a bright spot in her week coming to check on the new note in the birdhouse. And I didn't write anything profound on any of those notes. It was just a lot of Winnie the Pooh quotes, or anything else that I came across that week in my reading that I felt that really touched me or spoke to me or that I thought would speak to others. So yeah, I did have some fans.
Yeah.
And sometimes I was the weirdo kind of ducking behind a bush because somebody was there and I saw a dad with his children go by and check the note, and he read it out loud to them and they wanted to see it and then they put it back in, and it was really nice to see those moments.
Sure.
And I mean, this isn't high art by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a way to do something that was creative and to connect to people in a time when I think people felt very disconnected. Yeah. Okay. So let me see the next slide I have here. Okay, so now I draw kind of using 3 techniques. The first one here is, the squiggly line, and then you use that squiggly line to kind of guide and shape the drawing. And then that one is on the left-hand side. And then the one on the far right is more that line sculpting technique where there is no squiggly line to shape the drawing. It is just, making lines and seeing where they take you. And then that middle drawing is a combination of those 2 styles where you incorporate, there is a squiggly line, but you go kind of rogue and do the straight lines that are more sculpted rather than curved against the line. So yeah, and then this past weekend, so just know that at the start of, 2020, I was afraid of showing my work and I wanted to do everything anonymously. And last week, I applied to an art show last month, and then last week we had our opening reception. So now I have pieces of work in a gallery and they're hung on a wall with my name on it. And this is the first, thank you. And now I'm just like, oh, well, where else can I show my work? Which is not something I ever thought I would do. I never saw any of this coming whatsoever. But I also, this is the first creative work, these line drawings that I've done that I really don't care if people like them or hate them. It's just, I do them. I really enjoy them. And they really speak to people when they do speak to people. But it doesn't really matter. I think the process of putting out the rocks and contending with, some of the haters on the bird houses really helped me develop a thick skin and be less permeable to the opinions of others. So if you can find a way to do that, or if you, I mean, maybe you're thick-skinned already. I don't know. I think some people are just born that way. I certainly wasn't. But yeah, I think, you know, if you're doing creative work, sharing it is essential, but sharing it in a way at first that is comfortable with you, and then sharing it to whoever after that, and not caring, is probably the best and most empowering place to be. So that's all I really have for you guys. I do have some life advice if you'd like it. I don't know that I would take my advice. I can tell you a lot about what not to do. You know, don't tell other people, you know, what's reasonable, I guess, or, you know, what you should be doing. Because that's exactly what I did. I wanted to be safe. I wanted to be cautious. I wanted to be responsible. But in the process, I really abandoned some things that were very important to me. Because, you know, I mean, I needed practical things, money and education, those sorts of things, but I didn't choose the path that spoke to me. I chose it with my thinking brain instead of my heart. And I don't know that I would do the same thing again if I had it to do over again. Because being a creative person now is far easier than when I was coming out of school. You know, Facebook wasn't invented until I think my second year of college. And social media, Instagram was, you know, that wasn't until years after that. So, and it's those platforms really provide people with, especially visual artists, to have careers in creative fields that weren't available to generations previously. So, and I didn't see that coming. Like, had I known those things were in the pipeline and these opportunities would exist, I probably would have felt more comfortable going into a creative field. But I mean, we didn't know. You just never know what's going to happen. So I say, do what you want to do.
I think we have some, before we go, I think we have some practical questions
Okay.
regarding the work, and then we'll see where that rolls into. And then I wrote some, you know, you had mentioned the artist's way. I think that's a good thing for where somebody can get started. And so y'all start first.
Have you ever drawn your lines in like a different color other than black?
So I have tried different colors, and I get this question a lot. Everyone's like, try colors. And so the problem with drawing in colored pens is that the ink is less opaque. So you'll get dots where you pick up the pen and set it down, and you get a lot more, I guess, variations in the shades that aren't as pleasing. It's something that I could probably make look good if I practice at it. But at this point, I don't feel like I've mastered the art of the shape of the line yet. I feel that there is a lot of improving to do there. So I haven't wanted to kind of screw that up yet. I feel like color is the next level once I've mastered black, if that makes sense. And also, color gives me anxiety. It always has. I remember in third grade, you know, I wanted to do a pencil drawing because I didn't want to do color. And like someone asking me why not. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's such a commitment, color. And it's so easy to get wrong. And it sounds insane, but I've been this way for as long as I can remember. So I find black to be easy. So does that answer your question?
Talked about how your lines got progressively smaller. Is that just because you've been doing it for so long, or is there like a certain pencil or pen you use?
Yeah. So as I started experimenting with lines, I went to a smaller and smaller tipped pen because I liked that dense feeling. I I have, it's so funny because like my friends are like, try some color. And they're like, you should do some like wide sweepy lines. And so like the more spaced out, thicker lines look kind of cartoonish to me. And I'm chasing something that looks very organic. And I can't really explain what that's going to look like when I get there. But I am going for a more dense, finer lined look. And it's getting there, I think. But I still feel like I haven't arrived where I want to be yet. But that's why I saw that. I kind of just discovered as I was doing drawings that I liked the closer, denser lines, and was like, okay, well, how can I make them even closer and denser without, losing the line altogether? So I went to a fine tip pen.
Do you go into your art with like a specific plan in mind, or do you just kind of roll with it?
I never know what it's going to look like ever. I start out and it's also important to mention that there's some point in the middle of each drawing where I think I've ruined it. It looks terrible. I should throw it away, but I keep pushing through that and it surprises me. And then I go back and look at these old drawings that I absolutely hated and thought that had huge flaws in them, and I can't even see them. So yeah, no, they're a surprise. I don't feel like I have a whole lot of control other than I either start with a squiggly line or I don't.
If you make a mistake, is there a way to fix it, or do you just have to go with it? I kind of have let go of the concept of mistake in these drawings. For me, they really have a life of their own. And if my hand slips and a line like isn't shaped the way I had intended or thought it was going to go, I just start working off of that line. And I mean, I take it line by line and it literally just goes where it's going to go. And I rarely know where that's going to go.
Whenever you have a completed work, do you see like objects within your picture? Because whenever I was looking at one of them, it was like organic mushrooms that I saw, and I didn't know if you saw that too.
So I didn't see mushrooms, but somebody else has commented that they look like mushrooms, like the underside of a mushroom. So I don't necessarily see things in my drawings, but I absolutely love hearing what other people see in it. Like at that gallery showing, there were a significant amount of retired people, and basically all of them saw a colon in it. And I thought that was funny. So, but yeah, somebody saw it as like a deformed vertebrae, but I see organic things in it, or I see them as organic things. There's something very plant-ish to me. Like it looks like somewhere between seaweed and hair, or I don't know. That's kind of conceptually what I see in it. But I mean, people have pointed out faces to me that I hadn't seen before. But yeah, that's kind of one of the fun things about this style is that it's abstract and nobody sees the same thing in it. Everybody brings their own idea to it, and that's really rewarding.
So what do you call this? Is it, do you have a certain thing that you call it?
This style, I call it fine line drawing, abstract drawing, or abstract fine line drawing. I don't know that there is an official term for it. It's reminiscent or derivative of Zentangles. I don't know if you've ever seen those online, which is, a Zen drawing form. And I do find them to be very meditative. A lot of people will ask me, where do you find the patience to do these? And I don't find that they require patience at all. I just start doing them and then hours pass by. There have been weekends where
the only reason I stopped was because, you know, I was hungry or dizzy or my body hurt. And I realized that, you know, like I'd been drawing for over 8 hours and needed to do something else because my body hurt. So it's not a thing of patience. It's just something I really feel drawn to do.
How do you know whenever like a drawing is finished? Because whenever we were like whenever we were doing it, I found myself just like not wanting to stop and just like wanting to like build the entire picture. So like how do you like know like when you want to stop?
Yeah, okay, so that's so hard. So if you look at my very early drawings, all of them fill up the entire page because I also had that urge. And so in some of my, so that's what I did. I filled up the whole page and then I forced myself to stop on some of them because, and I got myself to do that by being like, oh, you can, you know, this is just one experiment. You can try something else on the next drawing. And then if you saw some of my later drawings, they have bare lines that are kind of like connector lines in the drawings. And I would never have thought to leave those as is, but I was with a friend and he wanted to see one of my drawings in process. And I happened to open up a drawing that was in process and I was going to start working on it. And he was like, no, stop. It's done. It's done. And I was like, what? And that I was like, okay. And I was like, well, all right, I'll leave it that way as an experiment. And then I posted that one online and people absolutely loved it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is a thing. This is something I can experiment with. So I think at first you fill up the whole page and then at some point you figure out, or during the process, that you get more depth and dimension to it if it has blank space as well. But at first you don't know. And then you just kind of make yourself stop at some point. And yeah, but it's really hard to know. And I never know. I never know. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just an experiment every time. What else?
You still visit your red birdhouses?
So they aren't there anymore. Some of the spots, like the ones in the picture. So I was at war with the park or someone in the park for a while. Every time I put one up, it immediately was taken down. And so my response to that was to make a bunch of birdhouses. And every time it was taken down, I'd put one up. And sometimes they would last, sometimes they wouldn't. And then eventually the branch that was very popular and where people were kind of creating this little artistic hub, they cut it down. So I couldn't hang the birdhouse there anymore. So, and I then got another job. And so I haven't had as much time to be in the park and keep birdhouses up. But there would be a birdhouse and I would be visiting it if I wasn't working full time, for sure, because, you know, I think they're important.
I was just wondering, I used to live in Austin for like 14 years and
Yeah.
I was wondering, what park did you go to? Was it Zilker or like,
No.
Okay, was it like a big park, small park? I was just
Yeah,
wondering.
so it's Walnut Creek Park. It's in North Austin. It's a newer stretch of the Greenbelt that they've recently renovated. So it runs by, do you know the Domain area?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, it's up by the Domain area. It's the
Okay.
Greenbelt that runs that stretch of between Mopac and I-35.
Okay, in between them. I got it.
Yeah.
So was it an easy decision? You distinguished that you started doing the birdhouses, I think you said, in honor of or inspired by the cardinals that you saw in the park? Did I just make
Yeah.
that up? You
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
So then,
Yeah.
so then that transference of color really didn't require much of a decision to paint them red.
Right. Yeah. And they looked, I mean, red looks so pretty against the green and brown of the park. And I put them in little nooks that were off the beaten path. So I wanted people to be able to spot them. So I didn't want them to be super obvious on the side of like a main thoroughway, but so I wanted people to be able to spot them, and I wanted them to be pretty. But yeah, and they were just plain birdhouses. They were easy to paint as well.
Right. Right.
And I was making a lot of them at one point because I was at war with someone. So, but I mean, that was also a really nice exercise because I felt like I wasn't going to let, I mean, because I didn't know if it was the park authorities or if it was just some person that didn't like that they were there in the park, or a little bit of both. But I really felt like I had a right to put this birdhouse up in this public space for other people to appreciate. And I fought for it. And I felt like that was an important evolution in my ability to share and exert the right for my art to exist, because I hadn't ever felt that way before.
So what do you do full time now, and how often do you get to do these drawings?
I work full time, and I work as an executive assistant at a different company. And I will say, so another magical thing that happens when you start showing up for yourself and advocating for who you are is that you get more. So when I was let go from my job, I had a really good boss, and when they shut down our office, that was the last time I ever saw him. And then I was laid off, and I felt this tremendous loss, even though I was gaining this other self in the process. But going back into the workforce, I was able to get a really good job with a small pharmaceutical industry working in the rare disease space. And I was able to negotiate much higher pay for myself. And it has a really good work-life balance. So I get to work on my art every day. The executives that I work for right now really respect, I work, not 9, like 8 to 5. And occasionally they have requests outside of work, but the workload is such that I can use my life outside of work for my creative efforts. What has changed is that I don't go out anymore. My friends know that they have to come to me, and that if they're going to come to me, we're not going to go out and drink or go out to eat. We're going to make art. And I lost a lot of people in that process, but I'm also gaining people as well who are also creatively driven. And my life is now going in a direction that is far more fulfilling than it was previously. So it's every day and every weekend. And then I hang out with my horse too. He's awesome.
You just touched on, like, most of these young folks in the classroom don't have a large amount of disposable income, and so if they do get money for themselves, then I would think that I don't second guess them spending it on themselves. However, you have challenged me in a good way, with the success of your stickers. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it was a selfless, I have this design, I'm going to make them at my own expense, and then I'm going to just give them to people who are doing kind things or who might, and it led to so much more, which we know that giving a gift, we have to remind ourselves that giving a gift is fun, and it also does something for you. And, I do believe for myself that COVID did a lot of that. I flourished more during that time and enjoyed the family time that I had. And so what I wrote in my notes is like, and you just said it, like, you don't go to bars anymore and you don't go out to eat. And so you're shifting how you're spending your money to do more constructive things. So like, maybe even a project that I do in this class is say, all right, we're going to take $100, or I'm going to take $100. Forget the class. Robbie, am going to just take $100 and I'm going to invest it in something that is, that I can get, whatever, pay to follow your route, get stickers made, and fully know that that's what it's going to be. And then just go out there and know that you're making like a bigger mark by putting them out there. I think that is so, it's a simple kind of almost, I don't want to say cliche in a bad way, but in a cliche, just kind of it's gonna do nothing but make you happy. So why the hell don't you do it more?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of like going back to, I mentioned The Artist's Way. So fun story about that book. I was given a copy of that book when I was 25 and had just left academia, and I was clinically depressed, and this therapist gave it to me, and I was like, I started reading it, and it felt too woo-woo to me, and I was like, this is a scam just to like sell a book, blah. I set it aside and didn't come back to it. Or I'd come back to it every once in a while, but for whatever reason I held on to it. Because I was, so academia at UT is very much, especially the psychology department, it's hyper liberal. If you're not an atheist, then your intellectual capability is kind of biased and suspect. And so I was raised very, very religiously. I was raised Mormon and had left that, and then ended up at a hyper liberal atheist oriented school. And so I wasn't willing to go to open that door and believe in a higher power or any form of spirituality, because my upbringing was so stiflingly religious and spiritual, that I just didn't want to even attempt to backslide. So I wouldn't go near it. But the interesting thing about being in a hyper liberal, godless institution is that I found it just as stifling as I did growing up in a hyper religious environment. And so at some point during my like adult life, I found Joseph Campbell, who wrote The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And he helped me kind of marry those two pieces of my life, so that I could believe in a greater good or a higher power or some energy or the universe, and aspire to something, and to feel that doing this creative work was doing good in the world or worthwhile, even if it was just for me. And that therapist that I was working with, she quit on me. She fired me as a patient because I wasn't getting better, because I was missing that piece, which I ultimately was hope and faith. And I was able to bring that back into my life. And that's still a driving factor that I don't really talk about, but I do see the more that I lean into creating things, that these doors start opening, and this connection to other people and other opportunities keep spontaneously occurring in ways that I cannot explain, and sure weren't happening before. I felt really stagnant before. So I'm not sure if that was the answer you were looking for, or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And I think your experience with The Artist's Way is very classic. I did the same thing. I got it years ago, put it aside, and then just had a group of friends who said, we're going to do a little book club. We're going to do The Artist's Way. And I was like, yeah, I've had a copy for a long time, and then and did it. Is it in The Artist's Way? Is that, I get the Artist's Way and Big Magic. I don't know if you've read that, but I get them. Is the Artist's Way is that the one where ideas are like, that's like ideas are out there waiting to
No, well, I think that okay, so that is actually, that's in Big Magic. She's talking about how genius is something that strikes you and you have to receive it and act on it. Yeah. It's not something, you aren't a genius, it's something that that comes from the outside of you. Right. Yeah. And but yeah, that's Big Magic. But I am becoming superstitious about these things, and I don't care if people think it's woo-woo or that my intellect is suspect about it, because I see these things happening in my everyday life. So it just doesn't matter.
It's working.
Yeah, it's working, and that's all I care about. And my life is much more fulfilling and productive than I think it ever has been. So, but yeah.
Zezelia, we are out of time. Suddenly the hour went by. But what's been I walked around the table a little while ago, and I think that a lot of the students are, as we're talking to you, they're doing the drawings as well, the line drawings.
Oh, yay. That's awesome. That's awesome. They're seriously meditative. So I was so excited to see your drawings and the videos that you sent to me. That was really great. I'm just like, oh, maybe somebody else is going to discover this and they're going to start this style of drawing. And it's what I find so fascinating is that you can find a lot of people online that draw like this, except they all look very, very much like their own thing. At first glance, you might think they're the same, but everybody's hand forms a different shape. And the shapes that people are drawn to are all different, and it can create entirely different aesthetics. So I would love to see the work that you guys produce. It's really special.
Well, we will say one student walked in, and it was actually Hannah, who's right here in the middle, walked in and said, I found myself doodling on this, and I did this color, and then I added this to it, and so, but she was doing it digitally, and now she's doing. I'm saying these are pretty. And Mile, come here. So, like, here we're doing about, starting with the heart in the middle. We've got that.
Oh, amazing.
Lexi, you can go ahead, get your stuff. There's one. And then Miles, the one who asked you about the pen that you use, Miles is like Mr. Small Detail going on here.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And
love it.
When you started talking about like getting about halfway through and then thinking, this is going nowhere, and I just want to that you were completely describing this girl's work
I love it.
Right here. Yeah,
love it.
She gets mad and mad and mad, and then wants to destroy it, and then leaves it be. Give me your give me that. Yeah, and then so this was from yesterday, Valentine's Day, and so.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. So anyway, thank you, Zezelia, again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I will. I'll get you this video, and I'll stay in touch. So appreciate it.
Excellent. You're welcome. Have a good one. Bye.
Come horn. I